Hi, good morning. My name is Randall, and I'll be presenting on behalf of my supervisor, Dominic Brunner. I'm currently a PhD student, so thank you for the introduction, Ditmar. So I'll be talking about my other part of my PhD project, which is entitled, which is part of a bigger project called NEMO2, and it's all about methane. So just a little bit of a background on methane. Uh, yeah, so methane is the second most anthropogenically emitted greenhouse gas, and they say that 1 kilogram of methane is equal to, it's like emitting 25 kilograms of CO2 in the atmosphere. And it has been steadily increasing since 2007, but on the scale of localized sources, the bottom-up estimates and top-down estimates does not really uh, match. So there's a significant disparity between the two. And so we have this project called NEMO2, which is an ITN project from the EU, wherein 9 universities across Europe and 13 partner organizations across Europe as well is working on mobile measurements of methane, which is, so the whole project is divided into 3 parts. First one is composed of 8 PhD students uh, for that measures methane across Europe, and then the next group is composed of 2 PhD students, which uses isotope characterization for methane, and then the third one is for the modeling group to model the methane, and this is the part where I'm part of. And so here are some of the measurements that we have gathered in the first year of the project. So a picture on the left is from Hamburg, and then the picture on the right is from Utrecht. And so we drive a couple of hours across different roads near places of natural gas, farms, coal mines, wetlands, and urban areas, and as well as landfills. And so the goal is, once you drive across uh, this road network, uh, you get peaks of methane from different sources, and we want to quantify how much methane is being produced, how much methane is being produced by different sources. And this is where my work comes in, because we want to in in my project, we want to provide a way to a proper methodology on properly collecting methane samples across the different road transects, and eventually we want to improve bottom-up emission estimates. Uh, so here you can see on the right that by coupling the local methane measurements and the GRAL model, we want to improve emission factors, which will eventually improve bottom-up estimates of methane. So moving forward to the GRAL, the preliminary results of GRAL, we had this tracer release experiment in Scorl, the Netherlands, where we had a point source Okay, so we have the point source. So we had the point source over here in the yellow thumbnail over here, where we had uh, a methane bottle which is constantly releasing methane from for about 2 hours. And we drove around this yellow road that you can see over here. And we had 3 cars equipped with a Picaro measurement device. And so the goal is to be able to quantify how much this methane bottle is emitting through modeling methodologies. And so here are the wind velocity and wind direction during this whole 2 hours that we were driving around this transect. So it's a very controlled experiment. I would say wherein we installed an anemometer that measures wind right beside the bottle of methane. So some initial, so then we run GRAL uh, for with on transient mode. You can see here. This is the transient mode of GRAL in a very, very high resolution, 5 meter by 5 meter horizontal domain resolution and domain of 785 by 500. And then we use this type of meteorology, which Getmar mentioned yesterday, the sonic that file, which is composed of the wind speed, direction, the friction velocity, the Obukhov length, and the standard deviations along wind, the crosswind, and the vertical wind. And since we don't know the amount of methane being released, we assumed an arbitrary source of 0.2 grams of methane per second. So here, so this is I showed the animation. And so what we did is try to replicate how a car would transect the plume. And so we cut it into, we transected the plume 2 ways. Here in the first transect, which is about 125 meters away from the source, and the second one, which is about 300 meters away from the source. And you can see here on the right the comparison between the GRAL model and the measurements. So the blue is the GRAL and the green is the measurements. And after which we have converted the mixing ratios to concentrations uh, into micrograms per cubic meter and then integrated it across the distance, ending up with micrograms per square meter. And then we have the area, and then we made a scatter plot of this plume integrals, which you can see here. So the different colors represents the different cars that was driving throughout this transects I was mentioning a while ago, and we performed orthogonal regression analysis, giving weights to the uncertainties in both the measured values and the model values. And so we can scale the arbitrarily chosen 0.2 grams per second and using a very simple formula like this one, and we were able to get uh, an estimate of the point source, which is around 54 milligrams of methane per second. And now that we have estimated the amount of methane that was released, we asked the controller or the one who was releasing the methane and asked him how much methane is actually released from that methane bottle. And he said that it's actually 57 milligrams per second. And we have an about error of 40%. So it's a little bit high, but based from another paper from Australia, uh, it's rather really not, it's common to have these types of error, percent error. So you can see the results from their tracer release experiments. And so right now we're trying to really reduce this error by doing more uncertainty analysis in the model. And now moving forward to another test case wherein we had this another pressure release experiment in Netherlands again, which is in Alkmaar in the Netherlands. But this time it's on an urban area, and so we obtained the buildings from OpenStreetMap, and then from OpenStreetMap we assumed a constant height of all the buildings by about 5 meters because we're only interested at the height of 2 meters, which is the height of the inlet of the measurement device. So here, and we were driving from this road going down, and you can see here on the right the comparison between the model and 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 the measurements. So yeah. Moving forward, so we did the same thing, integrated the plume in the vertical, in the horizontal direction, in the distance direction rather, and then we were able to get 87 milligrams per milligrams of, but oh, this time we have used acetylene instead of methane. So here we have estimated 87, and it's very close to the actual release rate, mainly because of the uncertainty in the model that we, and I think the regression analysis was really, this point gives it a better weight than the others. So which is why it's really close to the point source. Yeah. And so I think with that, I can conclude my presentation. So we have produced a lot of, we are currently doing a lot of controlled release experiments in Switzerland and in other parts of Europe to be able to really determine the sensitivity of the model. And right now we're also developing a drone at EMPA, which and then we're developing this quantum cascade laser that can fly across a field and measure methane. And then we wanted to compare the results of the drone and the model. So, which will be in a few weeks. Yeah, and these are the preliminary runs of the GRAL model and the drone. So I guess with that I finish my presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Randolph. This was a very quick and very interesting presentation, and you helped us a lot to save time.
Yes. So I try to keep it short.
Okay. So are there any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Lucy.
Yeah, just wondering, your sites were in the Netherlands, it's not a region where you need GRAL, because topography is something not known in the Netherlands. Do you plan also to use this in more distinct topography? And then how do you, if you do that, how would you deal with topographical effects?
Yeah. So thank you. So we have actually used GRAL before in Zurich City. So in terms of the topography, we can model the topography by coupling the model with GRAL. But I think the idea is we want to give out the model to different parts of in Europe, like in Paris, in Heidelberg, and in Utrecht, some other places, and dealing with the topography is not so. So right now we're trying to in GRAL we're trying to create the topography as building files instead of using GRAM in itself. So probably a small hill will be considered as a big obstacle in the model. So that's what we've been trying so far, but we haven't finished the developments for it. So.
Yeah.
Which time resolution did you use for meteorological data and also for the model, the dispersion time?
Yeah. So we have obtained 1 minute data resolution from the anemometers that we have installed in our controlled release experiments. But for the average, for the dispersion time in GRAL, we have used 300 seconds. And then by that, so every time we cross a plume, we look at the time. So for example, it was like at 2:23 in the afternoon, then we take the 2:25. So it's a 5 minute resolution model.
And the measurement time of the car crossing the plume is, I guess, a few seconds.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's
That may also explain the let's say, the deviations.
yeah.
Yeah, just a comment, there must be deviations because otherwise it wouldn't be a model, it would be reality. And as you know, GRAL is a model.
Yes.
But I think on a
I meant you compare, let's say, a measurement value for a few seconds against a model value for a time period. That was my.
thank you, Uli. More questions? But I have a question. So in the evaluation process, you the unknown was the emission rate, and you tried to figure that out. But in the model knew already the correct source configuration. Is that right?
For the second one? Or?
In the Holland test case, the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So you put a point source already at the right place
Yes.
in the GRAL model.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we try to know what is the source.
Yeah.
So
Okay. But I'm quite happy with those 40% because on a single test basis, you know the deviation due to the stochastic nature of turbulence.
yes.
Deviations up to a factor of 2, they're just normal on a single case. So I think it's quite a good result. Did you also play a little bit around with the roughness length, by the way?
We haven't. So we are always using a constant roughness length of 0.2.
Would be interesting to what extent this would affect the concentrations as well.
So I should.
It's very easy to change that. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, thank you very much, Handel, for your interesting presentation. And we are moving on to Italy and Alessandro Bici from Universidad di Milano. Modena. Sorry, too much beer yesterday. He's going to give a very short presentation on a project about forecasting air quality from traffic emissions using the GRAL model. The model is just in the starting phase, and so he's not going to present us final results, but he's just trying to outline the project, and I think it might also be interesting for you because it's a non-standard usage of the GRAL model. So thank you, Alessandro, for coming. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Dietmar and Marcus, for the invitation. Actually, yes, as Marcus said, I feel a little bit I feel a little bit like an intruder because you will not see any GRAL simulation from me and any GRAM simulation from me. So we just what we would like to do with GRAL basically. And I'm here, as you can see, I'm Alessandro Vigili. I'm here on behalf of the team. The team is relatively large. We have university, like university in Modena, in Saragossa, in Firenze, and in Santiago de Compostela. And there are municipalities, municipality of Santiago, municipality of Modena, and there is also the regional administration of Toscana. And then we have a supercomputing center, which is CESGA, is a supercomputing center in Galicia, it's in Santiago. And we also have like Lapida, which is a data center for the region of Emilia-Romagna, the region where Modena is sited. So basically, these are like the 5 Ws that, like, if you would allow to ask questions, this is what like the answer for the 5 basic Ws. So prepare we started, it started actually in November 2018 and will end up in October 2020. And it will be, like the project cities are Modena, Florence, Pisa, Livorno, Santiago de Compostela, and Saragossa. And what is TRAFER about? TRAFER is about analysis of urban air quality urban air quality and traffic and local atmospheric emission by the combination of sensors and simulations. Why are we doing this? We're doing this. We are doing it because of we would like to have environmental policies which are tailored on like each city. We also would like to have people informed and aware about air quality and about traffic, basically. And also because of fun, because we get to like the invitation to come to Innsbruck to do presentation and just play with models and sensors, basically. And who are we? We are a enthusiastic group of environmental engineers. We have computer scientists, which, as we have noticed, we need them just because we need computing skills, and also policymakers, which are like represented by the municipality and the regional administration. So actually, the only proof of the existence of TRAFER so far is just the website, which is like in the model area is just something. So this is the website, and you will find this presentation on the website. You will find previous presentation on the website, and yeah, this would be already like done the presentation because this, but just going on, and the project cities are here. There are 4 in Italy, as we said, and 2 in Spain. As you can see, we will all use the same methodology, but the cities are different. So, for instance, Luis Santiago is like on the hills in front of the Atlantic Ocean. Then we have Saragossa is like kind of in a valley and it's really dry and hot. Then we have Modena, for instance, is in the Po Valley, which is very humid and is a hot spot for Europe or for NOx and PM. So then we have Florence, so we have also some marine sites like Pisa and Livorno. Livorno, there is also a big harbor. So we have kind of like different cities, different situations, and but the same methodology. Was like something that we wanted to stress because we appreciate it. And this is like a preliminary flowchart of the project. It just gives you a little bit about the interaction. I will not go into details, but this just gives you a little bit of the interaction between policymakers, the models that we're using, the sensors that we're using, the apps, the dissemination that will be done within the project. And I will just focus on the 3 main tasks of the project. The first activity is the air quality monitoring by low-cost sensor. So the goal of this activity is to produce semi-real-time map of air quality. And this is the first task. And the second goal of this task is to have some measurements spread around the town, because this will be focused on urban areas. Have measurements around town to check our model, to improve its performance, to improve its let's say calibration, so just to improve the parameters and to tune the model on more data than the usual data by the urban air quality regulatory standards station. And the feature of this air quality by this low-cost sensor, if you don't know it, these are like small tiny units, let's say like this big, and they are battery power, and they can host up to 4 electrochemical cells. Each one of these cells will give you an estimate of the concentration of these 4 gases in TRAFER, and NO2, CO, and ozone. And so we will spread these around town, and they will be deployed in specific locations that we decided based on a priority list. So we will go for low emission zones, which are useful for policymakers. We will go to urban park, hospitals, like places where you do outdoor activity, or streets and residential areas. So we will spread those around town, and we have data from them. Electrochemical cells, they will deliver data, they will collect data every minute, and they will deliver it more or less every 1 to 3 hours, depending on the setup. So we have somehow high time resolution there. And then these local sensors, they will be regularly, on a regular basis, they will calibrate it by co-location at the urban air quality station. And we will also estimate the uncertainty both by the calibration model and by the electrochemical cells, because they have several issues like any other instruments, maybe a little bit more than standard instruments. So we need to be careful about the data that they produce, and then we also keep the a quality control, a control check for this data, since we will produce real-time mapping, we would like to know if these maps are somewhat within our like uncertainty ranges. And the added value of Trafair is like we improve, one of the added value is like the improvement of the infrastructure in the cities. For instance, in Modena, we set up a LoRaWAN network, especially for GRAL, for the Trafair, actually, and which will be used by like, other devices in the future. And so we have this added value. Another added value is that we will collect data with the same instrumentation, or almost the same, across all towns. So this potentially may allow to build a calibration model, like a common calibration model for different climates and different cities, different situations, which is kind of like a unique possibility for local sensor users. And this is like how the map for, this is a map for Modena, this is how it would look like. The map with the red dots, you see the urban air quality station from the regulatory network, and then there is like some places around town, so there is residential area, hospital. In white there is the Trafair headquarters, which is the university, basically. And this is like just a possibility of what it would like the map for sensors. Another activity is traffic flow modeling. So basically, the goal is to develop semi-real-time map of traffic flows around the road network for the urban areas. And the idea is to build statistics of traffic across the network in order to have this data for a better emission estimate for GRAL and the spatial models. And the feature is basically these models, they will get real-time data from induction loops or traffic cameras. They process this data, and they will use other information about the network, about the traffic lights, about the restriction, and they will estimate traffic flows even in streets where you don't have traffic information on real time. And one of the aspects of this model is that you will need large computing resources. It will store a lot of data because you're processing this data in real time. So it's also computing demanding. And for instance, one of these models is up both in Florence and in Zaragoza. In Florence, you will end up with something like this. For instance, you have traffic flow on the bottom from the sensors, and sensors are in the red dots, and you see traffic, a little bit of map. So it's like a Google traffic map, basically. It's a quantitative map. That is the other value. And then the last class activity of Tracker, which is maybe a little bit more interested of, is the dispersion modeling. So the goal is to do an impact analysis of urban emissions on local air quality. We will focus mainly on traffic first, that's why Tracker. And then we might have like specific source that we can like somehow characterize very well, that we know about it. And the idea is to set up a service of forecast, like they say 24 hours ahead or 48 hours ahead, for urban air quality at a urban scale from primary emissions by traffic. So just deliver every day to the citizens a map of how it would look like with the weather forecast of tomorrow, with the traffic that we expect for tomorrow, which is, let's say, on a Sunday in spring, given the emission that we get from the traffic model, what would we expect the map to be? And also, we would like to have GRAL as a tool for doing scenario analysis. So for policymakers, let's do this type of restriction, let's do this type of policy, and just test them before in advance, and let's see if we apply them well, or just for policymakers as a technical tool. And the feature of the simulation that we would like to do is like cover the whole urban area. In Modena, it's going to be something like 6 kilometers by 6 kilometers, running at 4 meters by 4 meter scales. And we would like, as I said, set up a realistic emission by traffic, by field composition, emission factors, and traffic flows. And in Modena only, we will also compare GRAL with another microscale model, which is PMSS, is parallelized microscale microsite spray, which is a model that we've been using since several years. And we will also compare these two models. And the other value of Trafair is that since we will need to set up a service, so we will have like requirements on computing time, we will work also on the improvement of the computing performance of GRAL, because we need the model to run like in a certain time. So that's why also there is a group of computer scientists that we will be also work on this task. And this is like the map that how it would look like. These are PMSS map, as I told you, it's like a very GRAL map, unfortunately. And this is like how I might look like. This is the domain that we are planning to use with the buildings, and like it's just a sample microscale dispersion models. And about overall, we have a couple of common methodological features which are like constrained by the fundings, and we are also happy to be there. One is the open data policy, and the other is the use of HPC resources. So open data policy means that all the sensor data will be published, so we'll have data available, and you will also available for download, and also the dispersion maps that will be available, that will be published. And also, this will also require a standardization of the data, standardization of the metadata, so they will be compliant, so that when you can download this data, they follow some kind of compliant rule. Maybe some of you know about Fairmont, for instance. The Fairmont community is just like kind of standardization of modeling. And the other task is like to process, to store, to analyze, post-process, pre-process. You need like large computing resources, and that is like because it's a big amount of data, and this is like the HPC resources that I need. And yeah, that's all from my side. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. It's a very interesting project, very sophisticated one and a large one. Crossing the borders. And yeah, are there any questions? Alessandro, as I got it yesterday, we discussed the whole project in the shift scaler yesterday. And as far as I understood, you're going to develop some pre and post processing features around GRAL. So GRAL itself won't be changed, but it will be adapted here and there, perhaps to be run on an HPC and a high performance computer, and you will need to have some certain pre and post processing routines added. So how do you think that these new features could be made public to the GRAL community after the project?
Yes, I mean it's consistently with the open data policy. Actually, I'm pretty sure I will also ask the people in charge, but the idea would be that this feature to be available. So just to be available also the post-processing routines, I think, and also the pre-processing, or it should be available. So we haven't started yet because we still don't have that much simulation to post-process again. But yeah, that should be the idea. I think so. I need to talk to the PI, which is not here, but I think so.
That would be very interesting because there are many people here working for local governments. And I think it could be quite interesting to get these features and to set up a similar simulation tool in their own cities. So yeah, it would be very nice. And I hope to meet you once again in the next GRAL workshop, maybe in 2 years or so, where we can.
Yeah, so we can have some simulation to show maybe in 2 years. I hope so.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alessandro. So now our next speaker is the one who had the longest travel behind him. It's David. Hi, David. Thank you very much for coming, traveling around the globe, just to be here with us. And he's teaching us two things today. One is about 2 years of experience using GRAL in Australia. The second one is English. He is kind of a native speaker here, Randa. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Vietnam and everyone for inviting me to speak today. It's been a fairly long trip, but it's been worth it. It's been a good trip so far. It's good to meet everybody here in person. What I'm going to be talking about today is our experiences in Australia over the last couple of years with GRAL. I'm going to go through a bit of an overview of air quality in Australia. Then we'll go through a few recent case studies of projects that we've used GRAL for. Going to be a little bit away from the normal sort of road tunnel-based projects. We've actually been using GRAL for large-scale projects for roads and tunnels and whatnot in Australia as well. But we're also sort of trying to see it as an alternative model to the traditional models that are used elsewhere for complex scenarios. And so that's what I want to talk about today with a few case studies there that I've listed there. Then talk about some of the future directions of air quality in Australia. Then just a couple of issues for just a discussion. First of all, for dispersion modelling in Australia. Dispersion modelling in Australia and air quality in Australia generally is governed on a state level. There's an overarching federal body which provides direction for all the states to meet an air quality goal. But on an individual state basis, then each state has their own environmental regulations and requirements, and they all have their own guidelines and their own opinions and their own ways of doing things. So it's pretty much horses for courses. So wherever you go in Australia, you need to really understand the different attitudes towards different models. As an example, Victorian EPA back in the early 2000s put in their legislation they had to have a regulatory model, and as a result, back in the early 2000s, there was a model called OSPRIN, which is a very simple Gaussian model based on ISC3. That changed when OSPRIN simply became out of date, and they adopted AirMod. AirMod is now required for all projects in Victoria, except that there are a lot of situations in which AirMod doesn't perform very well. So they also allow the use of other models. Whereas in New South Wales, Queensland, and South Australia, the attitude toward modelling is you tell us what you want to do and justify it, and then you can use it. As long as you can demonstrate that it's been verified and it's been able to be used. The models that are typically used in Australia, there has been a history of trying to develop our own models, but it's really sort of more work that we really need to do. So they're really based on either US models, so the CalPUF and the AirMod approach, or the European models with ADMS and GRAL. So we really try to get those models and apply those to the Australian situation. We don't have the same restrictions on CalPUF and AirMod as the US has with regards to the 50-kilometre rules for CalPUF and whatnot. It's very much, again, if CalPUF is appropriate for a coastal setting as opposed to AirMod for inland setting or a tall stack, then you use it. Yeah, as I said earlier, GRAL's been used for transport for probably the first project that was really used on a large scale in Australia was a project called WestConnex, which was the largest road project in Australia over the last 20 years. And so it was a very rapid learning curve for the company who started learning how to use GRAL and how to apply it and justify it. And it was a big learning curve for the regulators as well. That sort of moved through the system now. There's a lot more understanding, a lot more users in Australia who are actually using GRAL. First case study we'll look at is a wastewater treatment plant cogeneration emissions assessment. Essentially, what the company came to us and said, we've got a wastewater treatment plant. We have some cogeneration plants on site that we need to move. One of the peculiarities of this particular location, if you can sort of see, it's on a headland just on the edge of the ocean. All the sewage from all of this area around here and sort of back about 10 kilometres, 15 kilometres comes into this location. And as its gravity mains, it goes down quite deeply. Being on a headland, the problem that they have is that where all the people do the work is about 20, 30 metres down underground. And so they have to draw air in underneath because of all the hydrogen sulfide that comes through there. If they didn't, you wouldn't be able to work there. So they've got a lot of air intakes all over the site that draw air into the underground work area, but they need to make sure that the air being drawn in isn't compromised. And that's where this project came from. Sort of see here, these are all the buildings that were put into GRAL. We've just exported them out of GRAL and put them into Google Earth just as a 3D representation. You sort of see here, that's where they're proposing to put the cogeneration units, and there's locations about here and here and here and all over the place where they're actually going to have to be drawing air in. So we needed to have multiple receptor locations at multiple heights and be able to try and estimate what the concentration would be. Looking at the traditional models, so the AirMod and CalPuff, they really wouldn't work because of the complexity of the fine scale of the model and of the area. So we've gone to, that's what the reason we went with GRAL was it's much more fine scale and actually sees the buildings. So the biggest problem we're having with a lot of these projects that I'm going to talk about today, it's all about being able to see the buildings, to be able to understand the flow of the air around the buildings. So that's the area we're looking at. So that's the north side of Sydney Harbour. So the Sydney CBD is sort of back down to the sort of bottom left. We had got access to fairly high quality terrain data, but even that terrain there, you're only talking about sort of sea level up to around about 100, 150 metres. So it's not dramatic in terms of the hills around here. Yeah, we really only have hills in Australia. We don't have mountains. So when looking in terms of the ground grid, you can sort of see a little bit of an impact here. This is the predominant wind direction from the sort of the south. There's a little bit of an impact around here. You can sort of see around here, which you'll see in a sec. The treatment plant is actually built into the ground a little bit. So what we actually see is a lot of the predominant wind that goes over the top, and so that causes a few other issues. That's the building and the terrain around the actual treatment plant itself. You can see that area there is sort of built into that sort of excavated out of the rock, and that's where they put all their treatment activities. And so that area there is where we're talking about for the cogeneration plants. We put all the data in the model and ran it, and we got this. This is the results that we received. We got for the SO2. I think it's SO2 concentration. The SO2 was important because it was a combustion process with high levels of H2S. So what this sort of showed, nothing terribly surprising to be honest, but it sort of showed that you had a few areas around here where you had some concentrations due to when the wind when you had a sort of a nor'easter blowing down here. These tall tanks here, they tended to sort of really capture the plume. And the stack itself wasn't very tall. We were talking about 5 to 10 metres. Looking at the GRAL grid itself, so you can sort of see probably one of the interesting parts of this. There's a line that runs through here where it's about a 5 to 7 metre drop, and so it's just basically it's a work level and then straight down the bottom, and then there's some inlets immediately down below there. So it was quite a complicated area to sort of look at from an airflow perspective. You can see a real sort of dead zone in here where the wind sort of flows through here quite quickly, but it really dies when it gets down to this area. And we had an intake about there and a couple of intakes up here. We had a bit of a look at some individual hours to get an idea of whether what the model was doing from the perspective of at ground level and also at height. Because one of the main intakes was in here, and that intake is about 14 metres in the air. So we need to know whether the ground level intakes here were important and over here were important. That one was particularly important because it was the main intake, so we drew a lot of air into the underground. So this was the plot for the worst case hours, sort of looking at at 2 metres. So you sort of see that their concentrations aren't too bad. Then we looked at, and we looked at the flow at 14 metres. So this is the GRAL flow at 14 metres, and it had quite a different pattern. Because you see very high concentrations, obviously centred around the stack. It's terribly surprising. What we found interesting here was what the influence of these tall tanks, because the wind itself, you can see here, it tends to be fairly consistent and flows past, But you've got this a low pressure area back here, which tended to sort of drag the plume to the side and take it up around there. So it was a really interesting application, trying to work out if we could explain why certain things were occurring. And from a visualization perspective, it's been very good, because a client can look at that and say, oh look, we understand what's happening there. Because in the past it's sort of been very hard to try and explain to people how this actually works. So it's been quite a useful tool. The results, unfortunately, were confidential, other than to say that they complied. All the results were all well below the criteria that they needed to comply with, which was quite good. And as I said, the vertical layers reflected the predicted concentrations well as they were exiting the stack, so that worked quite well. And it really wouldn't have been possible to do this using the traditional models, because using the traditional models, the plumes would have just flown straight through the buildings, and they wouldn't have seen it. It would have been very hard to explain to our clients that air flows through buildings. Doesn't work. Second case study, for those of you who've been to Sydney, this is the Sydney CBD. There's a large redevelopment called the GRAL redevelopment, which is about $3 to $5 billion development. It's a former gas works site where they used to make all the gas to supply Sydney in the early 1900s. Basically, this whole area has been redeveloped all the way along to here, and it's sort of partially developed now. So these three buildings here are only brand new. But this area in here in particular is an area that they're just about finished remediating now. But this is going back about 6 months, where they wanted to know whether what they're going to be doing is going to be causing a problem for the new receptors they've actually built. So it's a different situation to where they, earlier on, when there was nothing there, they didn't have any real issues, because their receptors were further away. But now they've built these receptors and have occupied the buildings, they've now created a problem for themselves. This one here, they wanted to put a radiation tent in here, and that remediation tent, it covers most of the contamination, but there's also obviously doors. There are a few areas where they need to do things outside with regards to loading and whatnot. So they wanted to know whether what they're doing in this little area in here is going to affect that blue area in here. The tall towers themselves weren't too big a deal, because they were closed. They weren't open to air. But the area below, it was open to air. It had people. Areas for people to eat their lunches, and there was other areas like childcare centres and things like that in the area. So those, as I said, those are the two areas that they were most concerned with. So the podium areas. That's the GRAL grid that we looked at. The ground grid is quite a bit larger. Sydney Harbour itself is quite complex, but again, it's very similar to the first situation where when we say complex, it's only you're talking 20, 30 metre terrain, not kilometres. So all of these buildings were imported through. We have GRS library of a lot of the buildings in the Sydney area anyway, so we imported as many as we could use in that area. The most complicated thing here was trying to work out where to stop, because we had buildings going back a long way. So we tended to go back into the area down here, which is these areas were already in place, so they're not part of the development. That's a new development there. And the predominant wind direction in this area is actually sort of westerly, so it sort of comes in from the west, and there is an easterly component as well. But as you'll see from this one, there's a barrier of buildings along here that really prevent much of an influence of the easterly winds at all. It tends to sort of go around. So sort of jumping into the GRAL, we did all the GRAL modelling, and this sort of showed with the westerly breeze in particular, you had this the winds tended to sort of come in and sort of die around this area here where the excavation doors were, and they came and they sort of circulated in around these buildings in here. From the modelling, from the assessment perspective, this is quite useful, because it took the you can see here, it took the contamination and the dust largely away from the areas of concern which were down here. So there were just a little bit of sort of leakage around into here, but overall the concentration was really low, and it worked quite well to be able to demonstrate that the airflow around these buildings was okay. Similar sort of thing. All the concentrations were okay. Next one was a sewer main relocation building in a place called Burwood in Sydney. You might well see there that's the development there. It's a city CBD over there, very flat. There's virtually no terrain in between, no terrain in the area. The Sydney hinterland is rolling, just a very gently rolling flat area. Looking at here, this is the pre-development. So this area in here is the area that they proposed to put 3 towers. And they wanted to know, and one of the problems was, about here is an existing sewer main. It's about 10 metres tall, and they were worried, okay, if we put the buildings right, if we put brand new buildings right next to the existing sewer main, people's balconies are right next to the sewer main, it won't end well. And so that's a bit of an indication of where the buildings are going. And they're sort of showing there was 2 reasons they wanted to move the sewer main. First of all, was a practical smell reason. The second reason was they had to have a sewer main there. They couldn't just knock it over and rebuild it later. They had to relocate it first and then do their excavations for their foundations of the buildings. So this was the location that they came up with, and they said, "Oh, is that going to cause a problem?" And so similar sort of situation. NY Calpuff, it's too complex for those sort of models, too fine a scale. So into GRAL again. This sort of shows this is the ground grid and the GRAL grid. These are the buildings that were entered. You sort of see they're the 3 new buildings, short buildings here, but surrounded by a lot of taller buildings around here, and there's short residential buildings to the south. Put a range of receptors there. These receptors are put at multiple heights as well, so we sort of get an idea of like 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18 metres. Get a bit of an idea of what the impact's likely to be at those receptor locations from that impact. So this is the GRAL wind fields. You see a lot of sort of circulation of the air, of the winds around here, moving in a lot of different directions. So it was quite a complex situation. That was the existing. If we put it in, they wanted to know what the existing impacts would be. That was what we'd look at for the existing scenario. So not terribly surprising. You get very high concentrations at I think that was a ground level, and those concentrations were very close to where the stack was. Moving a stack by 10 metres actually made it worse from a dispersion perspective, and that's what we're sort of seeing from that. You tend to get more sort of bleeding down into this area down here. So it actually was a little bit worse, that was a little bit of a surprise. So the conclusion from this whole thing was, well, there will be a problem. That was the short answer. They said, will there be a problem? I said, probably. And so they said, what can we do? So we said, well, typically for a sewer main, you can put some mitigation on it. So they said, well, what's that going to do? And so we're able to sort of then go, okay, that's what you're looking at in comparison with that versus that. And so they were very pleased with that, and the mitigation equipment they put on wasn't very complicated, so that was a tick box and move on. Been dabbling with putting the contours into Google Earth as well, just to sort of try and get an idea of how it all looks from 3 dimensions. Came out okay. It's very good from a perspective of explaining to our clients how these things work, because one of the things we're finding is that our clients, particularly government clients, are asking, how do we explain this stuff to our constituents? How do we explain this stuff to the public? Because the public don't really understand. They don't understand any of the stuff behind what you're seeing there. They'll see that, and they'll want to understand that. And so this is what we're trying to sort of. It's the same with the 3D buildings and the flows around 3D buildings. Try and get a better way to be able to explain how this visually explain how this works more effectively. We also did some work where we looked at, we ran through Calpuff as well, out of curiosity, to sort of see what the results have come out like. We looked at a couple of receptors there, sort of one that 179 is quite close, and A3 was sort of around the corner. I won't go into too much depth, other than say there was quite a bit of difference, and it was quite conflicting, to be honest. Overall, when you're looking at the concentrations, at ground level, the Calpuff model was predicting a much lower concentration than GRAL, which was what we were concerned with. which is the reason why we did this, because we're thinking if CalPuff is essentially dispersing through the buildings, then you're getting a dispersion through a larger portion of areas, so hence your concentrations will be lower. And this really sort of backed up what we're thinking. When we graphed all the concentrations, and you sort of see there that similar scale of maxima, but the CalPuff concentrations dropped off much faster. And so that from a percentile perspective, when we're looking at these from compliance, that made a big difference. Again, sort of looking at the contours, sort of this comes back into that sort of visual tool to be able to talk to people about how this actually works. We can sort of say, okay, that's sort of what GRAL's looking at. We actually removed the building there, just to make it easy to look at. You can sort of see there that sort of hugs the building and sort of moves around it. Whereas CalPuff, basically that's what it did. And that has been what has been largely done for many years in Australia, where the buildings just get ignored. We just sort of take them out and don't talk about it and say that's what it looks like. Yeah, so again, we managed to sort of get compliance, demonstrate compliance, demonstrate to that CalPuff is probably under predicting for the odour concentrations in this particular scenario. The last one I'll talk about is there's a fuel storage facility in Newcastle. The problem we had here is a this whole area was industrial. There was all industrial areas in this whole situation. These areas here, though, they want to convert these into residential. And so they said, okay, if we convert those into residential, there were two questions. Will the existing facility cause a problem? And will it reduce the capacity of the facility in the future? And so those were two questions that were really on their minds. So we put all this into GRAL. Again, GRAL's not terribly exciting. We had a look at the flows around the buildings. They seem to be producing flows. They made sense. Newcastle in particular has very onshore breeze components, so not ideal from the perspective of I think the transient model will handle this much better with the onshore breezes. But for what we're doing for this assessment, it was fine. Results came out good. There was this location over here is a little stack source where the trucks come in, they connect up their tanks to a vapour recovery unit. That vapour recovery unit just takes out, as they're filling the trucks up, the expelled air goes through the vapour recovery unit. And so that's just the outlet from that stack, which is actually scrubbed, but there's always some that comes out. But overall, that actually worked out quite well. The concentrations were quite low. They had quite a significant capacity to be able to expand if they needed to. And the concentrations at the different levels of these receptors over here and the new buildings over here were such that they're very unlikely to cause a problem. A couple of things about future direction of air quality in Australia. The public in the last 10 years in Australia has become much more educated on air quality issues and become much more vocal in concerns with regards to air quality. So trying to say, whenever environmental impact statement or whatnot is done nowadays, air quality is starting to become one of the most questioned areas because it's people starting to understand the impacts from both dust, from gases, from various different things. Australia is becoming increasingly urbanised. There's really only five major urban centres in Australia. So Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth. And in those areas are becoming they're growing up as opposed to out. So there's a lot more sort of complicated urban scenarios being created, a lot more sort of wind tunnel areas being created in the cities. And so it's leading to the situation where complex assessments are becoming much more required because the simple scenarios where you had a facility and then you had a 500-metre buffer zone out to something that don't occur in Sydney and Melbourne and these places anymore. And there's a few changes in the regulatory approach that we're not exactly sure how this is going to work out. They're changing it from a compliance consequence sort of model where you go, you do an assessment, you do some modelling, you get some results, you say you comply or you don't, and they tick a box and off you go. They're changing it to a more situation where they want a demonstration of best practice, and then the modelling and whatnot is only just one component of that. So we're not exactly sure how that's going to fall out because the definition of best practice varies from person to person to person, and there's no clear definition of what it is. Just a couple of GRAL modelling considered from an Australian perspective. As I said earlier, the big advantage of GRAL is visualisation ability to be able to sort of say, this is what the winds are doing, this is where the plume's going, and you can really tie the two together quite easily. So that's any further enhancement of that is worthwhile. We've been asked recently whether we can do three-dimensional visualizations of plumes, which is not easy at all. But it's the sort of thing that's the sort of the direction the questions are coming to sort of say, can you show us? We want you to show us what the plumes are doing. Sub-hourly impacts are starting to become more important, particularly for the reality. Most of Australia's population is on the coast. A lot of offshore and shore breezes, and there's a lot of concern with regards to single hour. We're using at the moment we're using hourly modelling. There are concerns that you do get that offshore breeze switch causing problems in over an hour, where you might be getting a calm where you've got winds howling in one direction for half an hour, the other direction the other half an hour, comes up as a calm, where in reality it's not. So there's a few so I think the sub-hourly component, the ability to be able to do it, will be really important. And the other aspects of sub-hourly, you do have some major projects on transport where you've got trains coming out of tunnels and trying to work out, okay, the train's coming out only 10 minutes out of an hour, and then you're trying to put that emission over an hour. Is that representative of the emissions? We don't think it is. And so being able to do sub-hour would be really, really valuable. Yeah, and I say that effective transient modelling in Australia I think would be really important. So that me done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for this very interesting presentation. And it seems to me that we have lots of work in Australia to do with air quality monitoring. And at least for Marcus and me, it's really exciting to see them all being used down under. And well, maybe the audience first the questions, Lucy.
Yeah, you mentioned in the conclusions that you're dealing in an area with large water bodies, and you mentioned one issue. I was just wondering, do you have experience how GRAL is dealing with wind field itself, the onshore, offshore? Because in Switzerland, of course, we have just a little bit of lakes, but our experience is that this is extremely difficult for many models, and there are, for example, there are some meteorological observation stations close to a lake. It's not even a big one. You simply can't use the data there because otherwise GRAL is doing.
Yeah, very much the same in Australia. There are a lot of meteorological stations that are all over the east coast of Australia, but you've got to be very, very careful which ones you use. In Newcastle, for example, we have there's a station that's on a headland. It's about 15, 20 metres high, and it's about 20 metres from the ocean. And the winds are always stronger, they're always different, and so you've really got to try and sum up which met stations are most appropriate to use for the model. Fortunately, the met stations go in there quite a way, so we've got in a situation where we can sort of look at it and try and pick up that offshore breeze influence without actually trying to get the over-influence, the wind speeds that are too high. So, because there are a lot of wind speeds that are very much too high to use, and in that situation.
More questions? Well, I think this is a great problem with the ground model currently, because I never deeply thought about how to treat sea temperature, for instance, which is the key driver for the land sea breeze. So, but I start to think about how to treat it better in the future when we move more to a transient version of GRAL, where we're using ECMWF data, so they provide already some sea temperatures. But I think this is really future work, and I hope that some of the GRAL users is going to support me in this work, because it starts to be a little bit too big for me already, to have GRAL run in a perfect manner all around the globe. There are so many different influences that yeah, we of course traditionally we focus on the alpine areas, which is difficult, but also this sort of land secrets is a challenge, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not only a challenge from the perspective of GRAL too. We had a similar challenge in terms of large-scale airmod projects have a problem. It's not recommended to use airmod within, I think it's within 5 kilometres or 10 kilometres of the Australian coastline. In CalPuff, that is more of a puff model and came methodology offshore breeze. But still, we do have that sort of sub-hourly issue where you do get calms at the transition point between onshore and offshore. So it's a complicated problem across the board.
I just wonder, I came across a publication of you, I think it was on an Australian conference, where I think I remember you made some comparison between GRAL, microscale prognostic regions in relation to fluent. Is that right? And I just wanted to know, did you play a little bit around with the number of iterations that you can adjust as a user in the graphic user interface? So the standard value is 500, which is a compromise between getting relatively good concentration fields.
Yeah.
So we validated the model for these 500 iterations. But on the other hand, if you look more deeply into the flow fields, then I would think that it would be you would benefit from higher number of iterations.
Yeah,
if you look at that.
Yeah, it's certainly something to look at. Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so thank you very much, David, and I think we have to quickly move on to the next presentation because coffee is waiting. No, we have 2 more presentations. Okay, I think it's Johannes will be the next speaker, please. I'm very happy to announce our next speaker. It's Johannes Gainer. He's a local. He's living and working in Innsbruck, and he's an expert for sure for metrology in complex terrain. And he will give us a presentation about the estimation of mean wind distribution based on shorter measurement periods. A very important topic because, as you all know, measurements are not available all the time for longer periods, and it would help enormously if we would have some methodologies to use shorter measurement periods for usage in expertise for regulatory purposes.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. As you said before, so I'm a local, so we're coming back from global issues to some very local issues, and this is also not a very big project we had, but some internal work we did a couple of years ago, and it arises from some really practical issues because people want to have some information on, say, wind at a tricky location, say close to a slope or something. So we take a look at our station network, closest station, or some in a similar orographic setting. We see, okay, we don't really have a station where we match the assumed distribution of wind. We go to a model. We have a couple of models. Our most important one is called Inca, so it's our own model. We take closest or most fitting grid point. We look at the distribution. It's not very good, which happens quite often in this sort of tricky situation. So what do? And we thought, well, maybe we don't go to a model there, but we just try to assume, okay, we measure there for some sort of short period, and then we try to upscale it to a mean distribution, and how would that work? So that's the topic here. So I already talked something about the motivation there. So our goal is to have some wind distribution at this place using a short measurement at the location, and short is important for not being too expensive and time consuming, and this was done a couple of years ago. It's basically a lot of work I've done and also two colleagues involved. One is here today, so at the back, Gabriele GRAL, she was helping there, and another colleague, he's called Alexander Clayton. So while setting this up, this was just set up in a sort of test situation. We didn't really go out and make mobile measurements, but we took measurements we had already and said, what if that was a measurement for a month or so? But while we set this up, this project, we said, well, maybe we want to have some questions beforehand and then try to answer them. So one is obviously how long do we have to measure to get a good wind distribution at that location, mean wind distribution. And mean could be yearly or it could be longer than, could be 10 yearly or so, so I'll talk about that in a minute. So how do we define good? What's our measure there? Then we tested different references, model, grid point, closest, and station references. Which one is best? Maybe that's dependent on the location. Then, of course, we have some distribution like from a model already, so when are we better than that? That's an important question. And is there some recommendation, and when should we measure? Like in which season? Is it good to measure in spring or summer or autumn? And could we say something about that? Okay, so our database is half-hourly time series, and we, for convenience, we only use data for 1 year, 2014. So all you here in the following is for this year, and the mean distribution is the distribution in 2014 in this best case, but it could be longer time series as well. We took care that we cover different orographical, topographical settings, meaning some stations are in a valley, some are in a basin, also covering mountain stations. I'm not talking too much about that, but just we took care that we cover the different settings which are relevant for Austria, obviously. And then for each location, we chose where we already have a measurement. We have 3 references. One is from another measurement, yearly time series, from another measurement we chose. And we chose then that some were the best we could find and some were not so good, just to see would the method still work if it's not even the best measurement we have as a reference, but some other. And then 2 model grid points. One is Inca and the other one is from the Rome model, where the resolution is not as high. So that was to find out what works best. This is an overview of the 14 locations we used, so I'm probably not going into detail there. On the left, you see that's the locations where we want to have the distribution. On the right, that's the station reference, and that's mostly from our network in Austria. So I think the presentations will be given out so you can have a closer look at that if you're interested. And I'm not, so there's also a grid point for each model involved in that, so it's not listed here. So what's the methodology? So first of all, I have the whole year, but I assume that I only have like 1 month of measurement, and then I distribute that. So I have what if the measurement was in January, what if it was in February, what if it was in March, and then I go on to what if we measured 2 months and the 2 months were January, February, March, and so on. If I slice out, say, 6 months starting in November, I go November, December, and then from the same year, January, February, March, April, because I'm only interested in the season influence. It's not a real time series, so it starts again from January 2014, just for you to understand. And yeah, so for this sub-period, I make a relation between the measurement at the location and the reference at the same time, and I will explain that in a minute. And then at this reference station, I have longer time series, so I know the mean distribution over a year or say 10 years or something. So I can make a relation back from at the reference to longer time series, and so that's the way how to come to mean distribution at the location in question. And at least, of course, the minimum requirement is we want to be better than what we had before. So I'll try to explain the methodology in real simple terms, and that's simplified because in reality we deal with wind direction and wind speed in classes. So we tested different resolutions there, like 10-degree sectors, 5, 20, what's the best come out, but so we ended up using 10-degree sectors and 9 wind speed classes from 0 to more than 7 meters per second. That's the highest class, so 7 to, say, infinity. But I'm only showing you here the methodology, like what it would be if only wind direction was considered, because I think it's easier to explain. In reality, it's the combination. So for each class you have, a class is a wind direction sector and a wind speed class. So from north with 1 to 2 meters per second, that's like would be one class. So it's 36 directions, 9 wind speed classes. But just to show you what the methodology is, so in wind direction only. So at the reference, that's always in red, held in red, we have, and that's in the only 1 month of January, say, or 3 months, January to March, in the sub-period, we take out all the times when we have northerly winds, and then we look at the distribution of this wind direction at the project station that's shown in the blue. So that's, of course, not always just north, but some distribution. It's not only one direction, but a couple of directions. And then we do the upscaling. We look at the reference stations. Okay, how often did we have north wind as compared to the sub-period? So it could be twice as much or half as much or something. So that gives me a factor. So I say if it was twice as much, the factor is 2. So I multiply this distribution by 2 at the project station, and then I sum up all of these distributions through all the classes, and I get an upscale assumed mean wind distribution at the project location, and then of course I have to normalize that so that the sum of all of these is 100%, because that's not assured here automatically. Yeah, how do we measure how good the result is? So we take the score, which is in per mil, or we could also just, if you multiply by 100, you could say percent, but we did it in per mil. So we take the sum of all the differences between the calculated and the real. We know that in this setting we know the real distribution. So in each class we take the difference, and we don't care if we calculated too much north wind or not enough. We had a look at the bias as well, but in this score it's just the difference. So if there is a difference, this sums up, and if just to see how it works, so if the difference is 0 all the time, of course the score would be perfect, so it would be 1000 per mil. And if the difference is maximum in all the classes, so you would get a difference of 200 there, because 100% in one in different classes, then 100% in the real gives a difference of 200. So that would be 0. The fraction here would be 1, and the how do you say so the score would be 0. I'm not showing you, but we also did this separately for wind direction and wind speed, because we want to know, well, maybe the directional part is not so good, but the wind speed classes distribution is better, or so, but I'm not showing that here. So I posed the question, what is good in our framework? So that's the answer. Or at least part of the answer combined with a bias, which I'm not showing here as well. So let me give you an example, and this is first, I'm going to wind roses because I think they're visually, we are quite good in inspecting them and seeing if the distribution is good or not as compared to like scores or something. So just to explain, on top, that's in Carinthia, where we had this talk yesterday. On top, that's Villach, that's the project location, that's the location where we want to have the distribution, and that's the real distribution which occurred in this year. The radial scale is the same for all, so you can really compare it. On the right, that's the yearly 2014 distribution of the reference, and in this case it's a station reference. It's the capital, Carinthia, and this is not really how the method works, but it's just to show you in comparison that it's not really close. So it's not that we use a reference which already shows the true distribution at the location very well. And then on the lower part, you have 3 results, and I just picked them more or less randomly. It's not focused on something special. If we measured 1 month in February, if we measured 2 months, February, March, if we measured 3 months starting in February, how does the distribution, the calculated distribution, look compared to the true mean distribution in this green frame? So you can see that after 1 month, well, we still have issues with overestimating this southeasterly, for example, and it looks a little sketchy. And this gets better, and after 3 months, it's pretty close. So I think like the sort of where do the winds come from, how strong are they? It's pretty good, and it's not easy to detect difference. They are there. Just note that the score there is something like 90%, so 900 per mil. So that's what a 90% quality sort of looks like, which is pretty good already. So I posed the question, how long do we need to measure in order to get a good wind distribution? Of course, that's station dependent, and so you could go through all the stations and we did and have a look at them, but that's the way where we can answer it. And of course, it's dependent on the goal we want to achieve, so how accurate do we need to be, but then you can sort of in this test case say, okay, 3 months are perfectly fine or something like that. Another example, it works the same way. So the distribution you want to find in the screen frame. This is now in a location in Styria. It's Seckau, it's in the valley, but it's widening a bit, so it's between a valley and a basin, say. And that's the model. That's our own model, the distribution it shows. So it shows the channeling in the valley, but it's much too narrow. which is quite typical for this model. And also the wind speeds, they don't match up. You see that the model, it shows a lot of more calm winds, which are shown in this violet color, for example. And so neither the direction nor the wind speed distribution is really good, although this sort of channeling is captured. So what are the results? And here I start with January. Again, it's not for some special reason, but just to show you selected results. For 1, 2, and 3 month measurements, the scores are a little bit lower than in the example before, but in the same range. And you can detect differences after 3 months still. So, for example, in how many westerly winds and what is the wind speed there, but still the general distribution is captured quite well, I think. So just showing you shortly some scores. So that's all the 14 stations, and what it shows is on the y-axis the scores, and then their mean scores over, and here's the period length. So from 1 month, I'm going to zoom in one, then you can see it closer. So we're going from 1 to 11 months because 12 months is the whole year, so that would be no match. And of course, you see that the longer we measure, the better the results. And I highlighted the 80 and 90% line. So we sort of think if we cross the 90, then we're fine for most applications. And you can also see the difference between the references there. So in this case, it's close to Linz in Upper Austria. The station is called Enns, the location. The model would be the best reference, so that's the red line. While the station, which is Linz, in this case, or the other model of Rome, don't give as good results. Taking out another example, since we're here in Innsbruck, I'll show you the results for Innsbruck University as well. So here we have a station which is not very far off, which is at the airport, so just a couple of kilometers off. So of course this station reference would give good results, quite as good results as the model. Again, Rome is not so good, so that's something we found quite often, that this Rome model, since the spatial resolution, horizontal resolution is not as high, doesn't give as good results as the other two. And showing you a mountain station there, this is Wundenkoder, it's more than 3,400 meters high. It's at the border from Cairo to Italy. And here, interestingly, the mesoscale model, a Rome model, gives the best results, while the results in general are not as good. I think that has something to do as well with the selection of the wind speed classes, which was taken constant and not applied to mountain station where the wind speeds are higher, so we should get more accuracy in the higher wind speed ranges there, and then the results would be better. But so just for comparison, we just left that unchanged. Okay, so that's our answer to the question, which of the 3 references is best? There's not one answer, but you have to look at locations and then say, well, this is better. And it's quite straightforward. So look at how close the reference station is, so you can get a feeling for that, and see if it's on a mountain top or down there, and then you can answer that. So that's just comparing for all of these 14 stations. The color codes would be in the legend there. So for if the reference is a station, if the reference is our own homemade model, if the reference is the mesoscale model, what are the results? So you get the impression of just the variety. So it's from station to station, it's different how this method works. And the lowest one is the one I just showed you. It's the mountain station. And also the difference between the references. So this is a little bit complicated graph, but I'll try to explain it in short. So last question is, when should we measure? So in terms of season. So this is all the 14 stations. Let's just work out what this shows. Turn to the top line. This is a station called Kundl, and then I plotted here for the reference at the station measurement on the left. In the middle it's Inker, on the right it's around the scores for the different start months. So for starting in January, starting in February, starting in March, if we measure 3 months. That's in the pattern. And then I picked up green color is best score, red color is worst score. So that's I'm trying to determine, is there, can I see some months where it's good to start and some where it isn't for all the stations. And so if you look at it in general, you see that starting in February or March would be a good idea at some stations and also for different references, while quite often starting in November, December, January would not be a good idea. And this is not about conditions, how to measure, and if the measurements are good, but this is about time of year. And so I think this is quite clear that you have to measure as long that you get all the relevant wind regimes which are there in a mean setting. So if we measure 1 month, we don't have any föhn winds there, we won't be able to capture the föhn component very well. How should we? And that's what it's telling us, that basically in spring and autumn quite often it's better. And that's where most of the wind regimes occur, while in summer we could have high blocking regimes or convective things. Of course, the valley wind regime will be there, but others might not, and so then the scores go down, and in winter as well. So that's the results. And then how long do we have to measure to be better than what we had before? So here on the right, you see all the stations again, and you see if we measure in the best season or in an average season or in the worst season, how long do we have to measure and how long is in months, because I only sliced out months, to be better when we had before. And on the right, that's our summary. So at 9 of 14 stations, we get better results after measuring 1 month. If we capture the right season, it's still 6 stations if we cannot pick the season and there's 1 station with not so good results here, as it seems from the numbers, so we would have to measure 7 months to be better than the reference, but there the reference is already very good, so actually we wouldn't even go out and measure and make this methodology because the reference is good, so it's hard to beat and we take a long time to measure. So that's the answer to the question, when do we get an additional value? Okay, to sum up, so we're looking for an application if no suitable wind distribution at the location is available, but we are asked for it. And we followed the path of just setting up short measurements there. In German it's called Sondierungsmessung. And we found out that at quite some locations 1 month would be enough to get a quite good distribution. Certainly after 3 months we would be happy. What's the best reference? In most cases it's our small scale model Inker, followed closely by a reference station if that is picked correctly. And the reason why the model is better in general is because it's quite often just close by, so we have a 1 kilometer resolution, so maximum difference can be 500 meters, something like that. Topographical influence, so best results are where we have channel flow, which is not very surprising as well. It's a little bit more difficult in basins where we can get wind from all sorts of direction, and the worst results were at the mountain stations, but I personally think we could do a better job there if we try to, but this setting is more set out for, in practical terms, most people want to have something in the valleys and not up at the mountain. So what could be done with that? I mean, it cannot be used directly for dispersion models. It's not a time series, or so I think there could be two paths which could be followed. So one, to combine this statistics with also stability classes, and try to go forward there, and or to upscale to real time series. So we've done some work on that, which is, it's not something which is finished, so I cannot show you there, but we're thinking about how could we go on and upscale to real time series and use them for dispersion modeling. So that's it from me. Thanks for the attention, and open to questions.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for this very, very interesting talk. Seems to be helping us in the future, at least, speeding up environmental assessment studies, and to save money, of course. But we all hope that you will succeed in including the dispersion classes, stability classes, and to succeed in extending the method to time series. Yeah. So, are there any questions? It was a very convincing talk. And the method so far, has it been published already? You didn't go very much into the details of this scaling method, so you tried to simply explain it to the audience. But do you have some papers on that, or which you could make available for the GRAL users?
We don't have yet, but we're thinking about doing a publication.
That would be fun, because then everybody could apply the method. Yeah. Okay, so if there are no questions at the moment, thank you very much, Johannes. And we're straightly moving on to the coffee break right now. We're moving the next speaker to the next session, so we have still 3 speakers after the coffee break. And I think that we will meet again at 10 minutes past 11, if I'm right. Okay, so see you 10 minutes past 11 here again. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to present our next speaker. It's Lucy Bergami. He's already well known, very well known among the GRAL community. He's using GRAL since a couple of years, and he's, so to say, a pioneer of using GRAL and promoting GRAL in some sense in Switzerland. And we see that in our statistics that in Switzerland there is a growing community of GRAL users, just as David Rowling is a promoter in Australia. It's actually our largest GRAL community outside of Austria. So I think we have around 40 users or something like that. but Switzerland is also steadily growing, and I'm curious to listen to your talk. And the floor is yours, Lucy. Thanks.
Thank you, Dietmar. Yeah, experiences using GRAL in Switzerland, I should say, actually experiences using GRAL at our company. And at our company, it's me, essentially. I will talk today about just everyday applications of GRAL. I have no research, I have no playing around with tricks and whatever, simply because I was too busy the last 2 years using GRAL in the way it is supposed to. Although Dietmar knows that this is, I not always use it really the way it is supposed to. That's why I cannot show any research. And this busy doesn't mean that I am busy, but the server is busy. Unfortunately, I have no boss who can buy me another 73 cores computer just to make some playing around. So this is just shortly the overview, a little bit about how we use it. I will talk today only about projects with order dispersion calculations. And this is then a few issues: winds at high altitude, local drainage flows, and the concentration variance model. Christian gave a wonderful overview yesterday of the usage of match to observation function and sunrise option. So I can basically skip everything because he told it to you. So this is what we do. We calculate the wind fields in certain areas. We don't use one area for whole Switzerland. That has historical reasons, because at some point I knew, okay, now I need to have the region of Bern, but I cannot wait 4 months until the whole of Switzerland is calculated. So I started with 8,200 kilometers, and then I went on and said, okay, now I need the central area of Switzerland and so on, and now I start to increase, and perhaps in 10 years I will be at the point where I have one region for the whole of Switzerland. Horizontal resolution, 150 meters. Vertical resolution, I try to reduce it from 10 meters. I will come to that later on. I stopped it, I'm back to 10 meters. Stretching factor is always about 1.35, but that depends exactly where we are. Number of vertical layers, I usually try not to exceed 20, but in the really alpine region of Switzerland, sometimes it's difficult. Angular resolution, 15 degrees. I tried in alpine regions 20 degrees. Also this one I stopped, I will talk about. Hybrid wind versus then has almost 770 entries in the 15 degrees resolution, which gives me with the sunrise option and 2,600 wind fields. And here you see our patches of Switzerland that will change in the future. That's the current status. And the stars are the meteorological observation stations by Meteor Schweiz. This is the official meteorological institution of Switzerland. The green stars are valley or more or less valley-based stations. So these really are local. These stations really measure the local wind, while the red stars are stations at higher altitudes. They typically are on top of a hill, and there they typically are on a tower. So you don't measure 10 meters above ground, but you measure 30 meters above ground or 150, and the highest one near Bern is at almost 200 meters above ground. Just want to point out here about these. I will talk later. These two stars very close to each other, just to have mentioned that right at this moment. Okay, order dispersion calculation. This one was GRAL. I skipped the details because we had a nice presentation by Christian yesterday. All the rest we do basically in the same way. Order dispersion calculation. Here you see 3 different projects that I have. You see the typical order dispersion calculations, agriculture, and pixies are very often a problem. And pixies in Switzerland, well, they are small, they are open, and the next neighbor is very close. So it's typically Swiss. I don't know how you say in English. In German, it's kleinkariert. It's Swiss. But these are three typical situations, I have to say. So for us, a pigsty that has 500 animals is considered as medium large. One that has more than 1,000 is large, and one that has more than 2,000 is absolutely huge. These are just scales. Okay? Now first, before I tell you all the things that do not work, I first want to say a lot of things work. We are, in general, very happy using GRAL because this allows us to make a much better distribution calculations than it was possible before GRAL and GRAL. There's various reasons also GRAL compared to Austria, of course, because GRAL deals with low wind speeds, while Austria has many problems with low wind speeds. But the GRAL, of course, because of the topographical situation in Switzerland. Most of our applications are in the Schweizerische Mittelland. This is, if we go back here, this is the region here. It's the region between two mountains, the Alps in the south and the Jura here, towards the French border. In between, so this region is relatively flat. Swiss standards, not Dutch standards. Huh? Swiss standards relatively flat, but nonetheless the local windrows changes on really small scales. A few hundred meters and it's different. It's because anyway you have hills, you have valleys coming from the mountains, and so you have completely different thermal wind field conditions. And somehow you have to map this, and this is done with GRAL, and it works very well in general, but it has some issues in specific situations. So let me show you one situation where you can see how it works very well. This is the northeast of Bern. City of Bern is down here. We have here one meteorological observation station, Koppingen. We have one project here. This is a huge pigsty for us. It has about 2,400 pigs. Essentially, these are all the pigs from the region here. They were in the village. So at some point, the people said, we don't want you anymore. You go out. So they built a large building here. And then after it was built, they decided to have new buildings here. And now, of course, these complain. That is very typical in Switzerland. This is very typical. And another one was here. This is a small one. This one I showed you a photograph before. First about the measuring station. Here you see the data. This is the measured windrows from the year 2012 at the station of Koppingen. Now we use GRAL. There's one difference to what Christian told us yesterday. For each project, I make my own local windrows. So I always choose, okay, which stations do I want to choose in the optimization process? Whenever it's possible, not only one, because optimizing only one is risky. So 3 should be the minimum, 4 is more than standard. And then I look at the local windrows at the site where I have my project, and I ask myself, is this reasonable? Because sometimes windrows works here, and not far away, with the same stations, it simply doesn't work, because it has chosen some wind fields that, by chance, at this point, has the wrong direction. And then, usually, adjusting a little bit the optimization procedure, it chooses some other, or it doesn't choose that wrong one that often, and so you get a good windrows. So that is the difference. Here I have chosen 4 stations, Koppingen with a higher relevance than the others, and you see that the GRAL data is indeed fits very well the measured data. Also, if you look at the stability classes, you see that stability class 7 is overestimated, and this is a general problem.
We have always overestimation of stability class 7, but this can be a problem because we use Alcatel in Switzerland, and we don't use Alcatel exactly as the Germans do, but we use Alcatel according to a Swiss standard how you should determine the stability classes. So this may be more or less a problem of the input data. Okay, now let's move to the huge one. So this is the calculated ground wind rows at this point. You see that, of course, the main wind directions, they are the same. The main wind directions are always what we call west wind from southwest, and what we call Wiese, this is from northeast. And it goes here a little bit more to the north than here, and this is perfectly reasonable because we know that down here it comes from the north. So it starts to move, and this is correct because you have some topographical obstacles here. And you see that the local cold air, it changed direction, and we made also a cross-check with Plan 21 from this is the cold air model from the Deutsche Residence that we also use, and the result is absolutely reasonable that the cold air comes from this direction. I don't want to go into details. Okay, and now let's move on here. Here. Oof. What happened? Oh, wait, sorry. So I was here at that farmer here that wants to build a new pixie. He has already one. He wants to make it a little bit bigger. I was there and said, well, that's not a problem. Yeah, of course you have cold air, but here you have a valley that goes down here, and here you have a little pass, so this goes a little bit up and down on the other side. So the local air, the area where local cold air can be collected, is small, so not a problem that will go through smoothly. A fatal error. What happens is that here you have the Emmental, and here is river of Emme, it goes to the Mittelland. So this is a huge area where cold air is collected, and essentially it all comes down here. Here, Burgdorf is narrow. So the cold air cannot pass, or cannot pass quick enough. So it starts to go up here, and it cannot go up until Kraunthal, and then eventually it will then go down here, and it will end up, and that's why you saw the distribution of the cold air here. It goes up here, and so on. Again, this was cross-checked with CLAM 21. It was cross-checked with also the observations from local people. It is correct. So GRAL really reproduces this flowing up and overflowing this here and producing this very important stability class 7 from south. Okay, so these are the cases to show you how we are happy and how it works, and now comes everything that does not work. The first issue, and these are the two observation stations I told you before, close to each other. We have one down here, Mühleberg in the west of Bern. You have the hydroelectric station here, you have the nuclear power plant here, and I love nuclear power plants because every nuclear power plant has a very sophisticated meteorological observation station. This is the meteorological observation station of the nuclear power plant, and nearby on a hill called Stockeren, there is also an observation station, and this is on a tower on about 40 meters above ground. And this is measured the diurnal mean wind speed at the river of Aare and on top of the hill. And you see exactly what one should see, that during the night in the valley, the wind speed goes down, and on top of the hill it goes up. And this is because the cold air collects in the valley, and by filling up the valley, it reduces the roughness length of the wind that is above the cold air. So the wind above the cold air layer, so to say, doesn't see anymore the valleys. The roughness length reduces, the wind speed increases. It's exactly how it should be, so the measurement is correct. It's not that drastic here, but these are the two stations that are closest to each other in Switzerland. So if you take other stations at high altitude, you get a much more drastic picture. But this is, because it's so close by, it is a very good example. Now this is the result by GRAL if I don't take into account this station. So I didn't use that one. Well, it doesn't fit at all. It fits at the Mühleberg nuclear power plant, but it doesn't at all fit at Stockholm. Well, so of course it does not, because you did not take into account any measuring station at high altitude. So GRAL simply cannot know what is going on there. Okay, now we take Stockholm into account. Well, what happens? The wind speed increases. It increases by about 0.5 meters per second in average, but it still does not show the correct pattern that during the night the wind speed is high. So it is something one should think about when you use matched observation and you use stations in the valleys, local, that see local cold air, and actually your site is above the cold air, or has a good chance to be above the local cold air, then you simply won't get good results. My favorite topic, local drainage flows. Local drainage flows are now in the 2017 versions, as we saw before, in general give very good result. I need to see what the new version will produce. I have the first areas calculated with the beta version, but I have not yet made any good comparison with the old one. So. But we have some problems. Here we have once, there's a farmer here. He has various stables here with cows and pigs, and the people down here complain. It's obvious, local cold air, drainage flow. This is what Clam 21 says, so we are about here. Here we have a hill, local cold air comes down. Here we have, it's relatively flat down here, and then the valley, main valley will be down here. That's what you see, it will flow down. Okay, the picture essentially doesn't change during the night, it's always the same. Just the cold air here will collect, so you get higher thickness of the cold air later. Well, and now what does GRAL say? That is what GRAL says. GRAL says that the cold air at this point, not down here, at this point comes directly from the north. What's the problem? Well, here we are at 480 minutes, so really after a very, very long time, 8 hours, and still you see that the thickness of the cold air layer, according to Clam 21, is considerably less than 10 meters, and our first GRAL layer is 10 meters. Well, it's a resolution problem. GRAL obviously cannot resolve this local drainage flow. That's why then I started to use 7 meters, and perhaps it gets better, but the convergence is so bad that I went back to 10 meters. Of course, if you have chimneys, usually you don't care about this, but since our pixies are all open and we have near ground sources, it is always a problem, so which I cannot resolve. So in that case, I simply have to use Clam 21 and say, okay, you see, we will underestimate this effect, and then make a little bit like this, and say it's not okay. Yeah, it's important for near ground sources. Not only vertical resolution can be a problem for local drainage flows, but also horizontal resolution can be a problem. Here we have a case, a small village in the Emmental. We have a farmer, and the rest of the people, they all gave up farming already. And this farmer, he has no problems with his neighbors, not at all, but he wants to build a big new stable. He's soon in, and he wants to build it here. Yeah. So I was there and said, well, okay, you have the main wind directions. That could be a little bit problem because the main wind direction is usually like this, but it cannot be in this way at exactly this point due to topography. And then you have the local cold air, but the local cold air will go down like here. So we have a very typical situation like in the Emmental. We have a relatively wide slope, but this slope is not uniform, but it has a lot of small ditches and sometimes also a little bit bigger structures, and local cold air drainage flows will collect in these structures. This is confirmed by clamp 21. So in the upper one we are about here. It goes down here. In the lower one you see the building. The new building is not here. The new building would be here. It's only the existing buildings here and here. And you see exactly where the new building should be. There is the local drainage flow is from southeast to northwest into this ditch. And this is the ground flow field. 150 meters resolution. Well, of course, it cannot show this because it cannot resolve these small structures. It's impossible. It's impossible to resolve. If you look at the GRAL flow field, so I made a GRAL model. I put in original topographical data at GRAL resolution. I put in buildings. Here we are at 10 meters height, and since most of the buildings are less than 10 meters, you still get arrows where the buildings are, but this does not mean that there are no buildings. They're all explicitly in the model. So you get the prognostic wind field, also of the topography, and still it doesn't turn. The cold air here does not turn down here. Well, simply because thermal effects are not recalculated. You only calculate the flow around an obstacle, but you don't re-invoke the whole thermal calculation, which would make the wind turn and go down here. So in the end, this guy here would horribly complain according to GRAL, but he will never smell anything of that sample. So also this, I tried to reduce then the resolution of GRAL, which meant that I had to drastically reduce the area of my ground area, also because I couldn't tell the farmer, okay, hey, wait 4 months until I'm finished and made it with 25 meters resolution, and perhaps it will work and perhaps it won't work. It didn't work, not even with 25 meters. It was not, the structures are so small that even with 25 meters I did not really get visible results. That is the local wind rose as it is given by GRAL, obviously not correct. Okay, and now my last case. Now it's the only one where actually now I also will talk about GRAL and not only GRAM. Until now I only talked about the GRAM component. This one is a project we had near Interlaken. This is the Lake of Brienz, this is the Lake of Thun, and in between is Interlaken, between the lakes. Interlaken has a meteorological observation station here, nearby the old military airport. And the meteorological situation is in a way very simple, in a way very complicated. It's in a way very simple that essentially everything here is canalized along the lake. So you have either coming wind like this or coming wind like this. But nearby, of course, you have the high mountains that will, as soon as you enter a little bit the mountains, will change everything completely. And what makes things a little bit difficult, this observation station is behind a hill here that's called Rügen. So the wind coming up and down is actually not seen very well by this observation station. And so this is the measurement, and you see that there is not really the wind directions that you would expect along the valley. This is because of this Rügen that is nearby, and you see the cold air that is coming down here from Grindelwald and Wengen. So are the downhill racers that come down here, and also from here. Okay? And this is what GRAL says. This is now with 20 degrees resolution. Sorry, that is with 20 degrees resolution, and you see, well, it's not that broad as the measurement is. And this project was the reason that I stopped using 20 degrees, even in alpine regions, simply because I don't have enough wind fields to show to GRAM to choose from. Therefore, I reduced the angular resolution. Of course, it would be nice to have other parameters to increase the choice, as you mentioned yesterday, but the angular resolution is one of the parameters I can easily tell. And now, this is my project site. Here, I'm here at Untersee. Here, the cold air comes down here from Beatenberg and Hacken, comes down here. Most, according to Climb 21, most of the cold air goes to the Lake of Thun, of course, but there is a considerable part of the cold air that goes like this. In the first part of the night, Interlaken will be a hotspot that is filled by cold air coming from here, and eventually, after some time, it will even enter the Lake of Brienz, which, of course, is a reservoir of heat. So that is why this windrows, in principle, is perfectly reasonable. And now, here's some choice of one of the emission calculations, order hours. We have, here we have buildings of the zone of, let's say, Wohnzone, inhabitants. And here is the farmer. And this one here is a new project of the farmer. The project is ridiculous. It's really very, very small. It was essentially ridiculous. The point was that he was illegal because the local authorities did not were not careful in the past. And actually, this table here is the problem because he would be illegal. So you made this dispersion calculation, and here you see with the constant ratio equal to 4, so that's the GRAL model where another hour is calculated if the concentration is more than 0.14 other units per meter cubed. It gives a very reasonable pattern problem that's far too high. With these, the farmer absolutely no hope that he would ever realize that one. Well, in principle, they should close in that one. Okay? So what do we do? We are very close to the source. We have near-ground sources. Here we have near-ground sources, and also partially here, although here one has a chimney, but here's also partially here near-ground sources. We use the concentration levels model. Then things will come down, and that's the result. And now, well, how much is it here? Something between 0 and 15, perhaps. It looks rather erratic. And I thought, what could be the problem? And I thought, well, okay, the problem could be that I don't calculate enough cases. So perhaps if I can calculate more cases, recalculate and get different results, I will get somehow a smoother distribution. I asked Dietmar, and said, well, we can't do this with the version we have right now, but here you have the beta version with transient loads. Try it with transient loads. And that's transient load. Perfect. So it's still rather difficult. Well, distances are very small. We have suddenly resolution problems. We are really on the edge of what the model can do, but at least you get somehow a smoother emission pattern. What's the reason? Why does the concentration variance model fail in the static case and not in the transient case? Well, I cannot go into the code. I cannot analyze each step because I have no debugging version. But I can look at the concentration fluctuation intensity that is generated by the model, and the concentration fluctuation intensity, which is the basis to calculate the R90 to mean ratio in the concentration variance model, that is in the stationary mode is absolutely erratic. So obviously this cannot work, because from one cell to the next one, probably the R90 to mean ratio will change so drastically that you get in the end this emission pattern. And if you look at the transient mode, it gets much better. The reason why exactly it happens, I don't know, because I cannot go that deep into the model, but at least one sees why in the session mode it must fail. Possible reasons: I have relatively high frequency of ground wind fields, so the most frequent ground wind field is almost 6% of the whole time, which is of course very much, if you think about that we are interested at order frequency of 10%. So you see obviously some statistical problems showing up here. It's numerous small buildings, small grid resolution 2 meters. So it's really, a lot of things can happen, a lot of things can go wrong. And interestingly, the distance to the source is unimportant. It's not that down here it gets somehow better. It's not at all. Okay. Well, that's it. Let's come to the conclusion. GRAL in general is a wonderful tool to calculate emission concentrations in region with distinct topography, and will get better and better every year. Horizontal and vertical resolution may limit the application in case of local drainage flows, and if ever you see erratic patterns of other hours with the other frequency model, simply hit the button transient mode. And then my most important conclusion, Dietmar, Marcus, and all the team, thanks a lot for all the work. It's wonderful to work with GRAL.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for this wonderful presentation. It's this kind of presentations that I like most, because these, believe me or not, but these are the ones that help us to develop them all in a better direction. And I'm really surprised about the odor thing. I've seen that for the first time. There seems to be a problem. Maybe it's even connected with the topography. Maybe there's something wrong in the code. So because the model is primarily mainly validated with flat terrain cases. So Michael will present the data set right after. And the model works quite well, and we see this dependence from this distance dependency of the concentration variance rather well. So I really have to take a look at that. It's the first time for me that I see such nasty things happening. The problem with the low wind speeds, or the wrong diurnal pattern of wind speed at high elevated stations, is something that is well known. I see that quite often in stereo when I make comparisons between GRAM and observations. Unfortunately, right now I don't have any idea why the model is doing so bad at higher elevations. I have the hope that when we change to transient mode in the GRAM, and to have much more variation coming in from global scale models, that this could be solved hopefully, but I'm not quite sure, because I don't have the right understanding why the model is doing something wrong here. Yeah, and the other things are interesting, but the resolution, I think that will be a problem also in the future. Maybe the new version will be a little bit better because of the bug fixes surface energy balance, and it will probably help, or I hope that it helps to better resolve a little bit this older drainage problem. So that was just a remark. Thank you very much. And now, the audience, are there any questions? Okay, so we have no GRAL use anymore. Okay.
Question: how many particles are known for the
the example, the last example you showed with for the stationary situation, which setup which didn't work that good. How many particles per second did you use? Maybe.
I played around a little bit with that. It didn't really change. I check usually the recommendations according to Austria 2000, and then you see that with GRAL for any source you are way above this. I usually try that. I calculate all scenarios at once with source groups, so different chimney heights and so on, and I try that I'm well above 100 per second for each scenario. So sometimes I have 1,000 particles per second because I have many different scenarios at once.
But it looked a little bit like, I hope that this is the problem, yeah, I hope, because usually I use a higher number of particles for one case, so let's say 200 or 300, when I apply the concentration variance model at that high resolution. It would be interesting also to look at that problem if you increase a little bit the resolution, but it could give us a clue on whether there's a statistical errors here playing in. But of course, it's not your job to do sensitivity studies, but it's very good that we see possible problems. Yeah. Okay, more questions? Okay, so thank you much. Lucy, news from Switzerland, bad news. We have 2 more speakers before we are ending the workshop with a question and answer session. So we will do that for the first time, but we'll have a question and answer session. I hope you have already prepared all questions. Marcus and me will be available until, yeah, let's say 1:45, something like that. And so I think the best will be, this is just a little announcement that we're starting to think about their questions, and it's really, you can pose every question. So we have here beginners starting with GRAL, we have very advanced users, so don't mind whatever you didn't understand or want to know. Now is the chance that you can ask Marcus and me. I will try to answer your questions so we can have some discussion, of course, within the audience as well. Yeah, so I want to invite Johannes Ofner now. There you go. Hi. Hi, you have the pillar. And okay, we're still seeking for the presentation. So Johannes is working for the municipality of Vienna, and he intended to have a presentation on an evaluation of the air quality monitoring stations in Vienna using the GRAL model, but unfortunately, it caused a little bit of a political affair, or how do you say it? And he was not allowed yet. At the end, he was not allowed to give the presentation because this is a very, yeah. Okay. Maybe you explain it better. Okay.
As you had in the talk from Australia, air quality monitoring or even air quality is in public discussion and is increasing. And when we prepared to talk, or when I prepared to talk last week or the last weeks, everything was fine. Last week on Thursday, the discussion in Vienna was exploding about evaluation of air quality monitoring sites, and even so exploding that media, newsletters, television are focusing on that topic. And we as authority didn't like to force the discussion, or do not like to force the discussion, so we cancelled the initial talk. Maybe we can give it when it's cooling down, but not now. Then we discussed with Dietmar
do we have a different topic related to dispersion modeling? I remember in autumn we discussed about the topic atmospheric dispersion modeling, chemical transformation during dispersion. And before I start with, I was working 11 years in the field of university, chemical kinetics, atmospheric science, smog chamber experiments, data mining, reaction rates on particles and so on. So I hope it's not too scientific, but the first question is, who of you is familiar with atmospheric chemistry? Okay, perfect. Then please correct me and help me. And the talk is, I would say it's a community talk for the programmers, which might be interesting in the future, even from the side of the authorities. And yes, let's start. All of you know that currently we calculate the dispersion. So first we calculate the emissions of NOx from traffic or other sources, then we put the NOx emissions to our dispersion model. In this case, GRAL. We do this on the on local sites, even on the whole city. And with the good old Romberg equation, which is a parameterized approach, we convert this NOx to local NO2 emissions, which are limited by our laws. And you see, there are, or you know, there are 3 parameters. They are all different for different sites. It's for the roads, even for technical papers, for the cities. Different in GRAL, different in Vienna, different in Europe, different in Australia. But it's only a simple access to a more complex topic, and the so-called OSPM chemistry model by Turing et al., they try to go closer to this complex chemical model, because they have also some simple conversation. They take into account the NO2 emissions, or the NOx emissions from the traffic. They correlate it to the background side. But now you will see in this B value, which is important for the final calculation of the NO2 at the specific site. There is K, J, and this tau. And what's that? K is the reaction coefficient of the transfer from NOx to NO2. J is the so-called photolytic frequency, and the tau is a time constant, the so-called residence time, which they need to estimate the traffic background conversation. But this term here is now close to chemical kinetics. We will see this on the next slide. These 2 equations, the change of the rate of NO2 by time, or NO by time, is correlated to this kinetics coefficient of the reaction of NO and O3 minus the photolysis of NO2, and then there are these 2 parts, the traffic time constant and the background correction time constant. But the first part, for all of you who know chemical kinetics, this is one of the basic chemical kinetics formulas on gas-phase chemistry in the atmosphere, with some variations or some parameterization in the background for the traffic and for the background sites. But this approach is close to the chemical system, which really helps. Yeah? Because what we have here in the Romberg, it's only a parameterized approach. We do not know, Romberg says the chemistry is different, or the transformation is different in Vienna and all the other sites. It's the same chemistry. NOx conversion between NO zone and NO2 is the same in Australia, in Austria, the same in GRAL, in Vienna, and the same close to roads, and the same close in the garden or somewhere. Now, how is this chemistry working now from the chemistry side, not from the modeling side? NO2 is totalized to NO and to oxygen atom. This atom is quenched by a third body molecule like N2, And when it's quenched, it can react to ozone, and ozone can now react with the NO back to NO2. This is the so-called basic cycle of NO2 and the NOx chemistry in the troposphere. And currently no dispersion model is able to, or hardly any dispersion model implements this cycle. Most work with parameterized access. I do not explain to you what's this, but you can read afterwards on the slides. These are some fundamental equations in atmospheric chemistry. First order, second order, third order reactions, transition states. Some molecules form transitions which are not stable or you cannot access and measurement. You have the steady states. Marcus, you know all this from the theory. You have some steady state equation, for example, the OH radical in the atmosphere, which is a very important oxidizing agent. You say this molecule is rather steady because its direction times is that fast that you cannot measure, hardly measure the fluctuations, and so on. Now, what's in atmospheric chemistry is really important is the sun. The whole atmosphere is something like a big photoreactor, and even a city, a valley, is part of this photoreactor, and there are some driving forces. The most important driving force is the sun, performing photolysis depending on the wavelength and the so-called actinic flux. The actinic flux says how many photons of a certain wavelength are able to react in our chemical system. So that's a very important parameter in photochemistry. And for example, here you see some O2, which happens in the stratosphere. O2 is split by a photon with a wavelength below 240 nanometers. We do not have this in the troposphere, but in the troposphere we have this photolytic conversation of NO2 below 400 nanometers to NO. So important is the wavelength, important is the intensity. So you comment the actinic flux, and you can then easily calculate it with these spectral parameters how your photochemistry is working. What are the reactive partners in the atmosphere? It's the OH radical, some other radicals. We know ozone, NO, NO2, some VOCs or non-methane hydrocarbons, even the photon. Later we will see it's also SO2. Many of these are regulated by laws or even the Clean Air for Europe directive. Okay, so I told you these are the simple equations. If you remember Düring or Romberg before, these are the very simple equations for the tropospheric NOx chemistry. As differential equations, here we have also these residence times, but now more specific to the entire equations. And yeah, this is how NO photochemistry works in relation to, in this case, carbon monoxide, forming nitric acid and hydrogen peroxide and so on. But this is the most simple chemical access to the whole topic. There are some others, and this is a little bit more in detail. Now we add the carbon monoxide to the whole system, and you see now we have to solve 9 differential equations only for calculating the NO-NO2 ratio. A little bit more than normal. Why could this be interesting? Some measurement sites or some air quality monitoring sites see a slight increase, very slight increase in ozone. And why do we have this increase? Even the VOC emissions, most of you will know the tropospheric ozone is coupled to VOC, so non-methane hydrocarbons, or even to methane. Even the VOC emissions by traffic are strongly reduced in the last decades and last years, but maybe some other sources are activated, biogenic sources, by a slight increase in temperature, VOCs by trees and so on could be more released. And A basic principle of photochemistry, an old topic, is the so-called Los Angeles smog, the photosmog. From a book, it was in 1943 in Los Angeles, and coming up with this ozone can be considered as a secondary pollutant formed alongside the chemical reactions between precursors such as nitrogen dioxides and nitrogen oxides. With our currently dispersion models, we are not able to access this photosmog. And if the authorities or even the politics want us to model ozone emissions, currently we have to say we do not have the toolbox. We do not have the toolbox because ozone, you will see now, NO2 we can model, we can even model with the Rombert, but the transformation from NO2 to ozone, the so-called normal ozone cycle, or even the ozone cycle if we have other sources, if we have organics, VOCs or non-metal hydrocarbons, we are not able, because this process has to be done in the dispersion model itself. It has to be done on every cell of the dispersion model, because the VOCs change, the NO2 LO ratio change, and even the formation of ozone increases, which couples back to the cycle. There's a nice animation from Largy in the book Atmospheric Chemistry, where you see the cycle. You have VOCs, they are oxidized by the OH radical, and with the photolysis of NO2, you get a reduction of NO2 to NO, and on the other side, the quenched oxygen atom released here forms ozone, additionally ozone, and this is the so-called Los Angeles smog. Maybe a topic in future for us. Obviously, we have decreasing VOC emissions, but we have increasing temperatures, which might activate other sources, and some sites measure slightly increasing ozone values. Okay, what could be these dynamic sources? We have a lot of organic sources, even some cows are responsible for that, but another source, and that's why I call it dynamic source, is the vegetation. Why is it a dynamic source? Trees emit hydrocarbons like terpenes. In atmospheric chemistry, very famous is the alpha terpene, or the alpha pinene, like you see here, but the ground structure is the isoprene. And this emission of the vegetation of these terpenes or of other VOCs, it's depending on two important topics. It's depending on the temperatures, and it's depending on the light or the photoactinic flux. So even these sources are dynamic, and you have to model them dynamic, because in summer you have a huge release of alpha pinene. Is anybody here from the United States? No, I don't think, but maybe you know the topic, the blue value in the United States. We also have this effect in the Alps. We'll come to this topic. We form secondary organic aerosols in these values because at high temperatures and high light power, the trees release these VOCs. The VOCs react with the ozone, and the products nucleate to secondary organic particles and make a blue spot in the whole value. So, dynamic sources here. Dietmar told me nucleation or particle formation would be an interesting topic. Okay, the group of Markus Kulmerlau from Finland, or even Louis Baltensberger from Switzerland, and Neil Domergue from the United States, these groups work for, let's say, decades on the topic atmospheric nucleation. Atmospheric nucleation, the first physical chemical approaches were very simple. They said, okay, which gas molecules aggregate to form a cluster that condenses to form small liquid droplets. This is the so-called homogeneous nucleation process. You have a gas, the gas gets supersaturated and forms droplet, and these are your aerosol particles. Nature doesn't know homogeneous nucleation. Nature only knows so-called heterogeneous nucleation, And there you have primary particles where your material which condenses down forms larger particles. You can see this here, this is a so-called aerosol size distribution. Here's the nucleation mode at, let's say, 1, 2, 3 nanometers. Below that, the guys from Finland say there are cluster formed. And this nucleation mode, the number of the particles, they aggregate to the Eichen mode or even to the accumulation mode and form huge particles. Normally, our PM10, PM2.5, this is the coarse mode, these are primary emitted particles. But these particles are formed directly in the atmosphere by so-called nucleation, outgoing from precursor gases, organics, and various inorganic gases, and they form particles. Now, you see, organics and inorganic particles, gases, precursor gases, the formation processes are totally different. This is, you can see how here is some topic from my former work, how this nucleation, we call this banana plot, small particles are growing and form, in this case, about 60 nanometers in diameter particles. This is a raster electron microscope image of these aggregates. And I told you about the supersaturations. VOCs from dynamic sources react now with ozone and NOx species and form low VOCs, and finally they form with existing particles the nucleation modes, the same on the inorganic. And you have some parts how currently the idea is how this works. But finally you have to say there is no final theory of nucleation in the atmosphere. There are a lot of theories who think this works for large particles, this works for inorganic particles, but there is no finalized theory which you can take into your model. No, sorry, it's not. Into your model and say we can calculate nucleation in Vienna. Why this is a topic, for example, or why I bring this topic is the University of Vienna measures in the city of Vienna nucleation events in summer. The formation of ultrafine particles in the center of the city. Maybe close to parks, maybe close to sources we actually don't know. The particles are below PM1. Currently we have no regulation for PM1, but what happens if there is a regulation for PM1? What happens if there's a number regulation? Then we have to act with these topics. Okay, here you see some last nice pictures. The red particles, it's material from a huge city, I don't know, I can't the name, condensing on particles from the Sahara. This is also a part of condensation and new particle formation, and this is the smallest particle I've ever seen with my eyes. It's an atomic force microscope image of a 10.9 nanometer particle. Okay, maybe we have some sinks of air pollutants. Maybe these things are also dynamic. We can model the vegetation as a wind barrier, or as you now have in the GRAL model. But there are some studies who say also SO2, ozone, PM10 settle down or interact with the material. For PM10, it's 2 to 10%. For large areas, it could be quite more. There are reports of 25% at 100% coverage. This might change the distribution of PM10, and even, as I told before, it's a source for volatile organics. On the other side, a very hard topic is the multi-phase chemistry in cloud water or even in droplet water, but we skip this now. I don't need to explain how this is, how to do this. Even in the box we have additionally to emissions transport and so on, the chemical production, the chemical loss. GRAL is a very beautiful model. This chemical model is missing. And what for the chemical model could be interesting is the actinic flux. So getting values from the actinic flux, ambient temperature, relative humidity. All these parameters are important, or even more are important for atmospheric chemistry. And maybe some surface-based properties, but we skip this. Do we have models for those atmospheric chemistries globally? I do not have it in the talk, but I will add it. There's a directive of the VDI, the Verein Deutscher Ingenieure, it's called 3783, part 5, from 1999, models for the gas phase chemistry in the troposphere. So it's a rather old model. The chemical mechanism behind that is from 96, but the University of Leeds and the University of York and some other partners, they developed this so-called master chemical mechanism, which is focusing on this VOC topic, and it's used in smoke chamber studies and for box model calculations. The nice thing is you get it for free. And what does this master chemical mechanism do? There are a lot of reactions with the products, with the reaction constants and so on, the photolysis rates, everything you need for modeling atmospheric chemistry, even for the pionines, even for benzene and so on. And it's in some parts applied to so-called photochemical trajectory models, PTMs. Well, a simpler model, and this is a model which could be more easily applied, is the common representative intermediates mechanism. It's also from the same group. It's a small part of the MCM, and here you see, or you get a hint how complex the photochemistry of the simple species, which we now do with Fronberg, is really. Yeah? From the simple source, methane, down to CO2. How many cycles interact, how many species interact, and yes, this is done in the so-called CRI mechanism. There are a lot of sources. The task group on atmospheric chemical kinetic data evaluation from the UPEC is caring for all these reaction constants, and you have a lot of details. The thermodynamic heat, which is produced, you need therefore the photolytic threshold. Don't care about this. It's only to show you how complex the equation or the parameters for the equations are in the background and how many species. Maybe some of you know that oxygen could be there in not only oxygen, atomic, molecular, and ozone, but many different excited species which differently react. And have a look at the homepage, and if you want to learn atmospheric chemistry, you will find a lot of this there. Back, what's my conclusion on the talk? From those topics, especially the ozone production, but also the fine particle production, could become a topic of regulation. And if it becomes a topic of regulation, the authorities have to care for that. Those species which are relevant, these are currently regulated species in most cases. How could one solve this? I think you have the differential equation solver. You will need them in the power system. Not no. Okay. And one has to deal with this complex model and apply it for the use, for simple use, but not losing the let's say, scientific background of the model for interpretation. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for this very, very interesting but highly complicated talk. And thank you very much for changing the topic so quickly within a few days. I think you must have been working on that talk over the weekend.
Nice weekend.
But I have two questions. One is to the audience and the other one is then to you. So do you feel as a GRAL user, would it make sense to include sort of chemical reactions in the future? So my personal feeling is that GRAL now in transient mode, this should be basically able to catch up some chemical reaction in sort of a way that you've presented right now. But is there a demand from the community? That's my question. So would you find it useful to have some better chemistry within the model other than the Romberg approach, for instance?
I think an easy chemical cycle for zone, there some schemes might be easily implemented, but everything which involves the implementation of the differential equation solver, this is a very time-consuming task, and you have to restrict all the most important species and reactions. And actually, there is an initiative in Germany going on. They developed a climate model, a local climate model with chemistry, which can be also used for air quality forecasts or air quality analysis. It's the model PAM4U, based on an LES model. And they have already some results, but I know about the development, and well, I think that will be a model which can be used by scientists, but not by, let's say, people as in the GRAL user community. It's too complex, and also. If you have such complex models, the data you need, the emission data, it gets so complicated. Emission data, to be honest, what do we have? We have the map data set for Europe. It's on a resolution 7 by 7 kilometers. And there are no real efforts to improve that. And what we need actually information on a meter scale. That those data are widely available, I don't believe. And I can only say from this PAM4U, I work on emission data for this PAM4U model in a current project. Well, you can do that for a project. But again, to process this emission data, it's so complicated to get other proper data to compute the emissions itself.
I agree, yeah. On the one hand side, the models have to be, even they are complicated in the background, the models have to be simple to apply for the end user. And on the other side, emissions data like this dynamic VOC sources. Let's think on the EMICAT system, the emission inventory. Yeah? There are a lot of assumptions, a lot of modeling parameters behind that to get source range of various SNAP levels. And one level is the level here, the level 11, which should take into account the sinks and even what sources of these dynamic sources or parts of this. So I think with the Korean land cover data, or in Wiener we have this tree capacitor, you should be able to model this, but not on a small scale. It's always an inventory scale. It's always a huge scale.
David, you have a question?
Yeah, from the Australian perspective, the photochemistry has always been something that's been very caused a lot of disagreement between regulators, trying to actually get someone to agree to a specific scheme. And so there's a certain methodology used for one regulatory authority. The other regulatory authority says, well, we don't believe that one. And so this is probably, from our perspective, the more difficult idea of being able to put it into a model would be to say, well, which one would you apply? And being able to justify the different areas where different schemes may be more applicable.
We discussed yesterday a little bit, and I think this last statement, setup of complex models for simple applications, includes another part. You as a user in Australia or in Europe must have the opportunity to adapt the model and to say, okay, my authority says use Romberg, but or use the Turing model. The other ones say no, we want the complex MCM or what else. Yeah? But one could predefine models, but you must have the opportunity to adapt it to your local needs, because I think the developers cannot do this for for all authorities. Yeah.
Lucy?
I can just confirm from the point of view of a user for regulatory purposes, not researcher, we have to keep things simple. I cannot apply the Turing model. I simply don't have to duplicate that. Very simple, because what is I have to have a spatial resolution and a time resolution that is somehow comparable to my spatial time resolution of GRAL. Hopeless. Because ozone is, in Switzerland, ozone is measured at a few points only, because it's a very complex measuring system that we need. And then they use some distribution calculation at a technical level far below GRAL to make these emission maps for whole Switzerland, and absolutely hopeless can do it.
I agree on a local or regional scale, but if you have an inventory like an emission inventory, based on an emission inventory calculated with the dispersion model, then normally in the inventory you have the sources. And you have also your local measurement stations and the background calibration. So this Turing model you could apply. In Austria, I think it would be no problem from the data sets, but it's a problem from the calculation, because currently we cannot interact in the mechanism directly to apply it.
So other questions?
Maybe just comment on this Turing model. It acts on background ozone, and the nice thing about ozone is it's more regionally distributed. So it's not locally that different, has not local differences as N2 or ozone. So I'm convinced in most locations in Switzerland it may also to apply this approach.
Okay, other questions? Other suggestions? So, Johannes, my question to you is right now, would you be willing to support Marcus and me, because Marcus is not an expert in chemistry, neither am I an expert. So would you be willing to support us in probably 1 or 2 years to start with a very simple, if this is possible, anyway, I don't know, with some simple tests to include some higher or some better chemistry, maybe starting with NO2, chemistry cycle, how to call that. Could you support us? Do you have the okay from Klaus already, your boss? It's not here. He says yes. Yes. That would be fine.
I think it would be interesting, even the other models, I think they have to adapt to this topic, but to start with the simple parameterization. And it's also a very time-consuming step, so the calculation and the models. But if you're interested, of course.
Yeah, sure. For me, I just remember one very simple problem that I came over in everyday business. For instance, if you have NO emissions from an ice stack, and you want to know the NO2 at the ground level, applying the Romberg approach may be awfully wrong. Because you emit in an ozone layer, actually, and you use an empirical equation which is not derived for such for such a bloom reaction, I would call it this way. So I think we would highly benefit from such chemistry included in GRAL.
Yes, but to start with a very simple model, that's, I think a very simple model to start would be something like this here. I would have a look.
That looks fine for me. So give me an hour and no. Okay, so Johannes, thank you very much also for helping us in the future. Hopefully we will have some one or two meetings maybe on that, and we will start working on that. Yeah, that's good news. Thanks. So I come to the last speaker. It's Michael Martin from the government of Salzburg, and he will talk about an intercomparison exercise on the dispersion modeling of odors, which is performed across all the countries, Austria. I think we had contributors from Germany and Switzerland. Michael, the last talk is yours.
Okay, let me welcome. When I see yours, I see very courage people, and after this very high and really good lessons on atmospheric chemistry, let's go down to the basics. When I was forced in the late century to choose between GRAL and atmospheric dispersion, I took the atmospheric dispersion, and the first contact was some intercomparison with those late models in the area of Linz, a stack, and the results on that were really, really terrible. When I came home and told my boss, okay, I don't know whether these whole calculations of dispersion modeling really is taking place, because it went from some micrograms up to 100 micrograms, only one stack. I had a really not a good feeling when Dietmar asked me to do this intercomparison on dispersion modeling odors. But why do we do this? You know, the region of Tyrol is very well known for this word-by-word translation of Filterblätter and what's the other guy? Peter Schröcksnadel. I'm an old rabbit on those. And the first question is, why do we have to do this? We have made a new Austrian odor guideline in late autumn 2018, and therefore we said, okay, you can model with each model you like to, but you have to show that this model really is bringing good results. So as in Germany, the latest talker of yesterday told us Germany, they had one model. You have to do this. You don't have to think about, is this model good? Does the results really show what people can smell outside? We did a very time-intensive thing, the odor assessment in the vicinity of a big fatting farm using field inspections and dispersion modeling. We got there a very good data set, and this data set can be used now to check whether a model is good or not. Therefore, we do have this inspection data. It's the EN 16841-1. That means we went there 53 times in a half year, just smelling on 12 different points per 10 minutes, each 10 seconds, one breath, and signing up whether there is something from this pig farm or not. We did metrology directly on the farm side, so very good metrology just for this one. We have an easy topography there, and we have measured pig emissions, because we found out that the VDI factor are not really good. They're very too low, so we got this problem here. And we do have the right odor hours because of these field inspections. Just to have a close view on that. Okay, this instead were the pigs. I think 4,500 pigs are growing there and giving us some good Wiener Schnitzel. At the other hand side, here is the metrology, and these are these receptor points, 12, just around here, from 20 meters up to, I think, nearly 300 meters from this. Here were, I think, 4 different stacks where the pigs, not the pigs, but the odor of the pigs just came out. Good. And what we did, okay, we try to find friends, enthusiasts. They say, okay, we send out this data set. It's an Excel file, I think with 1 megabyte out there. We send it to the colleagues out in Austria, Switzerland, and Germany. And what I did get back was 16 results. 10 of them were made by GRAL and 6 with Austral or laser. The data results for the first thing, okay, this is a bad thing up there. They were analyzed, but we can talk on to this later on. Okay, these are the first results. We do have, at the one side here is the odor hours and frequency, and for the first thing we put up the 95% convenience interval appear here, and these were these 16 things. I just want to put out 3 of these receptor points just to show you what are the difference in here. Receptor point 1 is the very close receptor point to the stable. Here you can see the red line is always the right thing, green one is the confidence interval, and the blue ones are from GRAL, and the, I think it's yellow, is it orange, are from Austral or from Lazard driven. Here you can see we got some very good things. We have to talk, or we have to have a special look on why these models are just giving too small odor hours in that case. Just to show you around, here we have these receptor points. We have a distance to the middle of the stable of 21 meter. We are in the mean direction of the wind, and with all these problems that a stable could bring with laboratories and stuff like that. Just to show you the thing on EP5, the receptor point 5, we do have an overestimation nearly from everyone who's working with GRAL itself, and we do have very smaller things doing the other thing around. Again, receptor point 5 is about 85 meters from the center of the stable, and also in a very good wind direction directly coming from the stacks. And to show you the best thing, the best receptor point is receptor point 10. We do have here, I think 14 of these 16 results really lie within this confidence interval, and we see on that. To go back again, now we are 330 meters about from the stable center away. We are now just given the winds from the northeasterly side on that. Okay, just to look from the side of one who's working for the government, if it's too high, you mean these concentrations do show more than the right things are, it's not so bad, because you are on the side that it's better for all these things we could smell it. We do have some problems with that if it's too low, because if it's too low, there may be some annoyance going on without that's not shown in here. So these are the first quick and dirty results on that. We do have, or I ask you if anyone is going to have a little bit of time to make their own things, please send it to me. I will make it on in, because we want to bring it up to say not only GRAL, Laser or Austria, so we want to show off and say, okay, what's the difference if you use GRAL in the transient mode with classification, with no classification? What are really the results? What are these new things? Are really, can they be shown in here or not? So the effects in due to work as described in the documentation. Everybody knows if we're doing some projects, the time is always too short to say, okay, don't take the 2-meter grid, just take the 5-meter grid. What does this really affect on the real results of it? After that, we want to do a detailed analysis of the model groups. As I said, for example, the effects of the transient mode, the effects of the classification, yes or no, and so on. So what we want to give is there, maybe we are, or you, some of you, is in the bad situation that he has to be the overruler. He has two different model results here, and he has to say, okay, which one is right or which one is righter than the other one, to say on that. So again, please feel free to send me your results. I think there will be these on the internet, the list of the participants, sorry, or otherwise I could send it to you with the email. Everyone who is interested in. Last and least, to show you this result, plots from the different model results, again anonymized, just to see that there is, although it's always the same data set, we do have many different show arounds, what really is on and not. This is also, no, this is the end. And I want to end up with some words from Peter Schröcksner, who said Austria is maybe too small to good doping, but Austria is not too small to do really good Ausprägungen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mika. Thank you. So you helped us really greatly also to keep the time. I don't know how late is it right now. Do we have some time for discussion? So we're also almost approaching the end of the workshop, which is supposed to end at 1:00. So there's not much time for discussions left. But are there any questions regarding this data set? Anyone who wants to participate in this sort of auto modeling, testing, learning? So I think it's a very good learning experience. Oh, no one. Okay, so everyone has its duties. It's clear, yeah. Okay, so I think that we can come to the open discussion, or we have a few minutes if you have some burning questions under your fingernails that you want to pose right now. If not, Lucy? You? No? Yes? Yeah, of course.
Sorry, but I always have questions.
I know.
Well, essentially, I have like two questions. The one goes a little bit back to the the one goes back to the discussion we had before. I just forgot to mention you said when we release NO and NO2 from chimney elevated source, we cannot use raw air or curing or whatever. It's just ridiculously wrong. One, of course, completely oversimplified model, but sometimes still is useful, is the one that is implemented in Austria 2000, which is simply exponential decay rate. Now, it's an exponential decay rate of NO to NO2, so this is added to the original NO2. Since you already have now the exponential decay rates, perhaps this is something that could be easily implemented. Well, of course, it's certainly far away from a smart model, but sometimes it still helps to show certain effects. That is one thing, and the second thing, just perhaps the second thing is something completely different. I don't calculate a lot with deposition parameters, but in one project I was asked to show the deposition. I used their GRAL. It was, as usual in Switzerland, I didn't have local wind measurements, and then in the deposition pattern is then essentially determined by the 150 meter squares of the CLC data. So the CLC data has a 150 meters resolution because it's microgram resolution, and this was in the middle of a city was the source with the surroundings. So it had urban fabric, it had agriculture land, it had forest. But essentially, the emission, you saw this 150 meter checkboard structure, and not really what GRAL calculated. And I did not really see any way to circumvent that because you cannot provide a higher resolution CLC data.
I think that's just Marcus used a solution to that. I know that it depends, the deposition depends on the roughness length. And and if you don't have better data, so it's a little bit like garbage in, garbage out, yeah. But I don't think we can circumvent that problem within GRAL.
The problem is not that I don't have the data, because CLC is vector-based.
Yeah.
The problem is that GRAL reads the CLC,
I see the
and
problem.
then of course it produces the land covering structure in GRAL resolution, which is 150 meters, because I provide this at higher resolution to GRAL first, but it reduces the resolution to GRAL resolution, and then so if we need an option like use original topographical data, use original CLC data.
Well, that's a good point, yeah.
Or, of course, alternative version, I don't know how this is encoding, you simply give CLC as vector data, because it's anyway vector.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think this is something for 2021. Marcus? No, I think it's not that much work, but you have to implement it, you have to test it. But we will, I think this is something that we will make for you. Good suggestion. Marcus, to-do list? Okay, it's in order. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions? If not, then thank you so much to all the speakers for the nice presentations, and to all the others for coming, for the nice discussions that we have. I think we learned a lot, further improve the model. Everybody is invited to contribute, of course. Give us your feedback, your suggestions, and we will try to improve the model as good as we can. And now it's only to say goodbye. Have a good trip back home, and I hope to see you all back in 1.5 or 2 years at the next GRAL workshop with hopefully a lot of new features and some improvements of the model. So thanks for coming, and goodbye.